889 aircraft destroyed. Not by enemy fire, not by surface-to-air missiles, not by anything the enemy did, by the airplane itself. 324 pilots dead, killed by the machine their own country handed them and told them was the future. On the other side of the Iron Curtain, a different kind of cruelty. A Soviet interceptor so hungry for fuel that the moment a pilot pushed his throttle to full power, he had exactly 5 minutes. 5 minutes to kill something or fall out of the sky like a dropped brick when the tanks ran dry. North American F-100 Super Sabre, Mikoyan Gurevich, MiG-19. The first production aircraft in history to break the sound barrier in level flight. Both of them built by two superpowers who were absolutely certain they had figured out the future of aerial warfare. They were both catastrophically wrong. Today, we tear open the classified files on these two machines. The kill records, the accidents, the moments in Vietnam, Pakistan, and the Middle East where everything the Pentagon and the Kremlin believed got shredded by reality. And we end with something that should keep you up at night. Because right now, tonight, hundreds of 70-year-old MiG-19s are being gutted, rewired, and turned into something that could overwhelm a Patriot missile battery before it fires its second shot. Stay with me. Let us talk about what these machines actually were. Not the press releases, not the air show demonstrations. The real numbers. The ones written in accident reports in blood. The F-100 Super Sabre was America's declaration of dominance. 17 metric tons fully loaded. One Pratt & Whitney J57 engine pushing 16,000 pounds of thrust. On paper, it was a monster. The kind of airplane that made Soviet generals nervous just looking at photographs of it. The problem was the wing. North American Aviation gave the Super Sabre a 45-degree swept wing. Beautiful. Aggressive. And, under certain conditions, absolutely lethal to its own pilot. They called it the Sabre Dance. Here is what happens. You are landing. You pull back on the throttle to slow down. The swept wing shifts its aerodynamic center of pressure. Suddenly, the nose pitches up violently on its own. Lift disappears. The aircraft snaps into an uncontrollable roll. You have about 2 seconds before the ground arrives. 2 seconds. Most pilots never reach the ejection handle. 889 F-100s destroyed. 324 dead. The United States Air Force quietly reclassified the airspeed envelope. They drew a line and told every pilot, never let your speed drop below a certain threshold. Slow down, and the airplane becomes your executioner. The Soviets took a completely different gamble. The MiG-19 was not built to carry bombs. It was not built for long patrols. It was built for exactly one thing: getting to a target fast and killing it before it could react. Empty weight, 5.4 metric tons, roughly half of the F-100. But into that half-weight airframe, Soviet engineers stuffed two Tumansky RD-9 engines. Two, side by side in a fuselage barely wide enough for both of them. The thrust-to-weight ratio approached 0.86 to 1. That means this aircraft could accelerate almost as fast as it weighed itself in thrust. Climb rate, 180 meters per second. The F-100 managed 129 meters per second. Sluggish in comparison. But the MiG-19 had a death sentence written into its design as well. Two engines burned twice the fuel. At low altitude with afterburner lit, a MiG-19 pilot had 5 minutes of combat before his tanks were dry. 5 minutes. After that, No engine, no control, no landing. Just physics. And the engine bay was so cramped that Soviet ground crews had to tie their wrenches to their wrists with string. Because if a wrench fell into the engine compartment, you were pulling the entire rear fuselage apart to find it. Now the weapons. The Americans believed in probability. The F-100 carried four 20mm M39 cannons firing at 1,500 rounds per minute. At transonic speeds, one trigger pull created a wall of lead that any aircraft passing through would be torn apart by. Spray and pray, but with engineering behind it. The Soviets believed in certainty. Three 30mm NR-30 cannons. Slower rate of fire. But pull that trigger for 2 seconds, and you have just delivered 37 kilograms of steel and explosive charge into whatever you are pointing at. One hit from a 30mm round does not damage an aircraft. It disassembles it. 37 kilograms. In the air. Gone. That distinction, probability versus certainty, would prove decisive every single time these machines met in combat. April 4th, 1965. Thanh Hoa Province, North Vietnam. 0900 hours. The U. Air Force launched 64 aircraft at the Thanh Hoa Bridge. F-105 Thunder Chiefs in the strike package, heavy with bombs. F-100 Super Sabres on the outer sweep, escorting, clearing the airspace. The Pentagon was confident. North Vietnam had been operating its Air Force for 3 years. Surely the sight of this formation would be enough to keep their heads down. 4 MiG-19s came out of the cloud cover. Not the supersonic jets the Americans expected. MiG-17s, subsonic. Older design. But those pilots had been waiting, and they knew exactly what they were doing. They went straight for the F-105s, the bombers, heavy and slow under their bomb load, and in under 3 minutes, 2 Thunder Chiefs were burning and falling. Then the MiGs rolled away and disappeared back into the clouds. Captain Donald Kilgus was in the outer escort ring in F-100D serial 55-2894 when he saw the MiGs running. He made a decision. He pushed the nose down. 20,000 feet. Then 15. Then 10. Then 7. The F-100 was not supposed to dive like this. The airframe vibrated. The controls got heavy. Everything told him to pull back. He held the dive. At 7,000 feet, he squeezed the trigger. 4 20mm cannons found the tail of a MiG-17. The aircraft broke apart. It was the first aerial kill by an American aircraft in the Vietnam War. It was never officially acknowledged. President Lyndon Johnson, worried about escalation with Moscow, worried about optics, worried about a dozen other things that had nothing to do with aerial combat, refused to confirm the kill. Kilgus received a probable. A footnote. Later, declassified North Vietnamese records confirmed they lost 3 aircraft that day. But what that engagement actually proved had nothing to do with credit or politics. It proved the F-100 could not be a fighter. Not in this war. Not against these opponents. The MiG-17 that Kilgus killed was running in a straight line. In a turning engagement at low speed, the F-100 would have been dead. Its acceleration was too slow, its turn radius too wide, and its radar too primitive to employ missiles from beyond visual range. The Air Force made the decision quietly. No announcement. The F-100 was stripped of its air superiority mission. It was sent south, to South Vietnam, to fly close air support. This is where the story turns unexpected. The F-100, the airplane that killed its own pilots on takeoff, that was too slow to dogfight, that the Air Force had essentially given up on as a combat aircraft, became the most heavily used strike aircraft in the entire war. 250,000 combat sorties, more than any other jet aircraft in the conflict. Flying close air support, the F-100's limitations became strengths. Its heavy airframe absorbed ground fire that would have destroyed lighter aircraft. Its 4 20mm cannons could deliver suppressing fire with precision. Pilots became expert at dropping bombs within 50 meters of friendly troops. And then, someone had a darker idea. 1965. The Soviets had delivered SA-2 surface-to-air missiles to North Vietnam. These were the weapons that had shot down Francis Gary Powers in 1960. 40 feet long. Mach 4. 200 kilograms of warhead. They were destroying American aircraft faster than combat losses. The Air Force needed a way to kill SAM sites. The solution they came up with was, by any objective measure, insane. Take a two-seat F-100F. Bolt on primitive radar warning receivers. No anti-radiation missiles. Those did not exist yet. Tell the crew to fly deliberately into SAM engagement zones, broadcast their presence, and make the radar operators lock onto them. When the SA-2 lifts off, when a 40-foot missile going 4 times the speed of sound is climbing toward you, you tell the F-105s behind you where the site is so they can bomb it. And then you try to outmaneuver the missile. They called it Wild Weasel. The first volunteer crews were told, with complete seriousness, that their life expectancy in this role was approximately 2 combat missions before they were killed. Think about that for a moment. Not 2 weeks. Not 2 months. 2 missions. They flew anyway. The concept that crew demonstrated, using one aircraft as bait to expose air defense systems for destruction, became the foundation of every suppression of enemy air defenses doctrine that exists in modern warfare. Every time an F-16 with a HARM missile destroys a radar installation today, it is flying in a lineage that begins with those F-100F crews in 1965 who volunteered for something with a 2-mission life expectancy. Meanwhile, in the north, the MiG-19, or more precisely, its Chinese copy, the J-6, which the Soviets had shared the blueprints for, was quietly beginning to accumulate a kill record that should have been impossible. Now the other side of the equation. While the F-100 was finding its real purpose in the South, the MiG-19's direct descendant was building a kill record in the North that American aerospace engineers spent years trying to explain away. China received MiG-19 technical data from the Soviets in the mid-1950s and began producing their own version. They called it the Jian-6. The Vietnamese received them in 1969, designated them J-6. Western analysts tracking them on radar gave them the NATO name Farmer. Farmer. A nickname that aged badly. The F-4 Phantom II arrived in Vietnam carrying the full weight of American technological confidence. Mach 2.2. Advanced radar. Radar-guided AIM. 7 Sparrow missiles for beyond visual range kills. Heat-seeking AIM 9 Sidewinders for close range. The early F-4 variants had no gun. The designers had decided the cannon was obsolete. Missiles had made it irrelevant. Pilots of the 925th Fighter Regiment in North Vietnam understood something the designers had not accounted for. The AIM-7 Sparrow had a minimum engagement range. Below a certain distance, it could not arm and guide properly. The AIM-9 Sidewinder needed a clean heat signature from the target's exhaust, difficult to acquire in a turning, crossing shot. Both missiles required time and geometry to function. Time and geometry that the J-6 pilot was not going to give them. Below Mach 1.2. In a turning fight, the F-4 was heavy, slow to respond, and armed with weapons that needed distance to function. The J-6 at that speed, in that geometry, was a different animal. Thrust to weight of 0.86 to 1. Tight instantaneous turn radius. An ability to sustain angles in a prolonged turning fight that the heavier Phantom could not match. Get inside the missile minimum range and the F-4 had nothing. The J-6 had 37 kilograms of 30mm ammunition. May 1972. Strike packages running some of the most dangerous missions of the war. J-6 crews from the 925th targeted F-4 Phantoms from the 555th and 421st Fighter Squadrons. The engagements were short. The J-6 pilots approached from the rear quarter, the F-4's worst visual blind spot, closed to gun range, and fired. Between 7 and 13 confirmed aerial victories are attributed to J-6 aircraft over the course of the war. Most of them F-4 Phantoms. A design from the early 1950s, hand-copied from Soviet blueprints, was shooting down the most advanced fighter America was fielding. This is the moment where the honest comparison to the F-100 matters. The F-100 failed because it was used outside the conditions it was designed for. Put into a turning fight, it was too heavy to win. Assigned to an air superiority role its avionics could not support. The failure was real, but the cause was misapplication. The J-6 victories happened for the opposite reason. Those pilots kept the fight exactly inside the narrow window where their aircraft was lethal. Close range. Low speed. Gun range. They never chased the F-4 into a high-speed diving escape. They picked the terrain of the engagement and stayed in it. That is the repeat lesson the F-100 program never fully articulated and the J-6 program demonstrated by accident. The aircraft does not define the outcome. The conditions do. Pakistan confirms this from a different direction. 1965. Pakistani Air Force F-86 Sabres against Indian aircraft including newly delivered MiG-21s. Pakistan received J-6s as a counter. On September 20th, Flight Lieutenant Yunus Hussain, in a J-6, engaged an Indian MiG-21, the aircraft that was designed to replace the MiG-19. Newer avionics, faster, more capable on paper. Hussain forced the engagement inside turning range, where the MiG-21's speed advantage meant nothing. The 30mm guns ended it. 1971. Full war between India and Pakistan. Pakistani F-6, upgraded J-6, fitted with British Martin Baker ejection seats, and American AIM-9 Sidewinders, a hybrid of Eastern airframe and Western weapons, took on Indian aircraft across the full spectrum. Indian Sukhoi Su-7 strike aircraft. Gone. The Su-7 was fast but turned like a loaded cargo aircraft. F-6 pilots outmaneuvered them consistently. Indian Hawker hunters. Gone. British design, respected aircraft, outclimbed and out-accelerated by the F-6's twin-engine thrust advantage. December 14th, 1971. Squadron leader Amir Sharif in an F-6 shot down an Indian MiG-21FL. The aircraft that replaced the MiG-19, killed by the aircraft it replaced. In a turning fight, the generation gap disappeared. But here's where the honest accounting has to happen. June 1967. Egypt. Israel launched Operation Focus, a preemptive strike that military historians still teach as a case study in timing and preparation. Israeli aircraft came in low and fast at precisely the moment Egyptian pilots were at morning briefing. 303 Egyptian aircraft destroyed in the first 3 hours. More than 20 MiG-19s burned on the ground before a single one started its engines. The handful that made it airborne did not last long. The MiG-19's entire tactical system depended on ground control intercept, radar operators talking pilots onto targets. Israel's opening strikes hit the radar installations. The airborne MiG-19 pilots suddenly had no picture of the battle, no awareness of where the mirages were. They were flying powerful, agile aircraft in complete informational blindness. Israeli mirages with radar, firing missiles the Egyptian pilots could not track, killed them from distances no 30mm cannon could reach. Strip away the ground guidance and the MiG-19 was not a fighter. It was a fast airframe with no mind of its own. That is the limit the F-100's Wild Weasel crews never faced, because the F-100 carried human judgment in the cockpit regardless of what the ground told them. Those Wild Weasel pilots made real-time decisions that no ground controller could have made for them, in a threat environment no one had fully mapped. The F-100 failed on paper and improvised something that lasted 50 years. The MiG-19 succeeded on paper and died the moment the paper was taken away. Here is the strange historical footnote that nobody seems to dwell on. F-100 Super Sabre and MiG-19 Farmer shared the same war, the same sky. For years, they almost never fought each other directly. The reason is simple and slightly maddening. The Air Force took the F-100 off air-to-air duty before it could engage the MiGs in the north. It was sent south to bomb trails and tree lines and supply depots. The MiGs were hunting in the north, waiting for F-4s and F-105s, the bigger, more expensive targets. Two apex predators in the same jungle, eating different prey. Which means the definitive answer to who would have won. We have to build it from physics and the historical record. Here is what the aerodynamic modeling tells us. If an F-100 pilot was arrogant enough, or desperate enough, to enter a sustained horizontal turning fight with a MiG-19, he was dead. No question. The MiG-19's thrust to weight, its tighter instantaneous turn radius, its ability to maintain energy in a sustained knife fight. The F-100 simply could not match any of it. The 30mm guns would find the F-100's cockpit before the 20mm wall of lead could compensate. But if the F-100 pilot respected one rule, one absolute law of survival, the engagement changed entirely. Never let your airspeed drop below 800 kilometers per hour. Above that speed, the F-100's roll rate was exceptional. Its energy in a diving attack was massive. Use the weight. Boom in from altitude. One pass. Fire. Then, use that speed to create distance before the MiG could respond. The MiG pilot could not follow. At high speed in a diving pursuit, the MiG-19's fuel consumption would rapidly approach critical levels. Chase long enough, and the MiG pilot would face a choice. Disengage, or fall, out of the sky with empty tanks. The verdict, then, in pure close-range aerial combat, the MiG-19 wins. This is not debate. The record of J-6 kills against F-4s, MiG-21s, F-104s and Su-7s demonstrates what that airframe could do against faster, more modern aircraft when the fight entered knife range. The 30mm cannon advantage over the 20mm guns was decisive every time both pilots had an equal angle on each other. But the F-100 left a larger mark on history. 250,000 combat sorties, the highest number of any jet aircraft in the Vietnam War. An airframe so durable that pilots flew it into situations that would have destroyed lighter machines. And Wild Weasel. Every suppression of enemy air defenses mission flown since 1965 descends from what those F-100F crews demonstrated at a cost most people have forgotten. They flew into missile engagement envelopes deliberately. They baited the radar into tracking them. They absorbed the near miss to expose the target. The doctrine they invented, using specialized aircraft to locate and destroy air defense systems, is the reason that American aircraft operate over contested airspace today with any survivability at all. The MiG-19 was brilliant at what it was designed for and useless at everything else. The F-100 was mediocre at what it was designed for and exceptional at something nobody planned. History tends to reward the second type. One last thing. If you think this aircraft retired quietly to museums and airshow static displays, look at the satellite imagery coming out of Fujian province right now. Hundreds of J6 airframes, not scrapped, not displayed, being stripped of their cockpit systems, having automated flight control hardware installed where the pilot used to sit, fuel capacity maintained, weapons pylons retained. The Chinese military has been converting MiG-19 airframes, 70-year-old airframes, into supersonic kamikaze drones. Masked, low cost, expendable. The doctrine is straightforward. In the opening hours of a conflict over the Taiwan Strait, you launch these in swarms. Their mission is not to survive. Their mission is to exhaust the interceptor magazines of Patriot batteries, force radar operators to make targeting decisions under cognitive overload, and clear a corridor through the air defense network for the weapons that actually matter. A Patriot interceptor costs $2 to $4 million per shot. A converted J6 drone costs almost nothing. When a Patriot battery runs dry, and it will run dry if enough of these are launched, what fills the gap? That is the question that should interest you. And that is the question we answer in the next video. The link is on your screen right now. Do not miss it.